One thing that's always been fascinating to me about the mainstream iteration of what we're calling the left these days is how they openly advocate for violations of civil rights law. We have this story here from Will Sommer of the Daily Beast. Reddit's Black People Twitter forum wants to know if its users are actually white. Moderators for the popular subreddit had an idea to weed out the white users, but their experiment ended after just a few days and inspired right-wing outrage. Okay, you gotta fix this one for me. You gotta clarify this one for me, brother. If I'm against segregation, does that make me left or right-wing? Apparently, if you oppose segregation, you're a conservative. I'm really... Okay. Basically what happened was the moderators of Black People Twitter decided to do an April Fool's joke where they wanted people to send a picture of their forearm with a timestamp to prove they were actually black, and they would give you a verified badge. They still do this. It's actually fairly racist to do, and if they actually implement any restrictions, it may actually be a violation of law, restricting someone based on race. Let's read a little bit of the story. Every day, the moderators of Black People Twitter, the Reddit forum devoted to screenshots of tweets from black people, sort through inboxes filled with jokes about cooking, dating, or watching Marvel movies. And according to moderator Dub T Dub, that also means dealing with never-ending stream of slurs. Being that the most popular forum about black culture on an overwhelmingly white website that hosts a number of racist subreddits has brought other problems too. Excuse me. There are white people pretending to be black, and the disgruntled commenters who accuse the moderating team of posing as black themselves. The forum's millions of subscribers have been able to stay friendly in the comments on a post about cooking or dating, but if someone mentions a political issue like racial profiling, white people have flooded the comments to say they didn't see what the big deal was. The problem only got worse if one of Black People Twitter's posts was popular enough to make Reddit's general front page. This year, the moderators had an idea. What if they figured out who was actually black and then got rid of all the white people? Let's do a pause real quick. Let's talk about framing. Framing is something I typically reference where they're trying... are you familiar with poisoning the well? Poisoning the well is basically you provide information that makes something bad before talking about the actual thing so that the preconceived notion is a negative. Framing is the more general concept to where you can talk for a couple paragraphs about how important or dangerous something is. That way, when you talk about what they did and it was wrong, you justify it, right? So notice the first three paragraphs talk about how they're getting all these slurs and white people are coming in pretending to be black. They're insulting the moderation team. And then they flood the comments saying they don't see race. And then he brings up what they did. The reason Will Sommer does this, in my opinion, for one, it's probably fluff to make the piece longer, but it's also framing and shaping the narrative. He wants you to be like, these moderators are all victims, so they tried to defend themselves. And he may genuinely believe that's the case, but it doesn't matter. If we're going to take an analytical approach to what's going on, we need to start with just the facts. What did they do? Why did they do it? First, what did they do? They decided to get rid of all of the white people. What if they figured out who was actually black and then got rid of all of the white people? That's racial segregation. It's actually against the law in most public accommodations. So it would vary. Actually, no, I think Reddit may be exempt. Reddit would be exempt under Section 230 of the Telecommunications Decency Act, which is insane. But it is a violation of most social standards. But for now, it seems like the left is tolerating and supporting this. What if they figured out who this was and got rid of the white people? Well, it started as a joke on April 1st. Black People Twitter's moderators announced that only Reddit users who had verified they were black could continue to post comments or threads on the subreddit. Black commenters could send in a photo of their forearm next to a sign with their username written on it. In return, they'd get a check mark next to their profile verifying that they were black. It's a joke. I have no problem with offensive jokes. Really don't care. But it did piss off a lot of people. The April Fool's Day experiment outraged the right-wing internet and has shaken up how one of Reddit's biggest forums deals with race. With more than 3 million subscribers, Black People Twitter has become Reddit's 59th most popular subreddit according to Reddit list. The subreddit relies on a simple idea: screenshotting tweets, usually jokes from black Twitter users. Here's the thing. After April 1st, they keep doing it. They then said that, let me see if there's the link. Eventually, someone created a subreddit just for white people. And I don't care to read too much of his story. Writing about Black Twitter, Late Night Black, April Fools, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I don't know exactly where it is, but at some point, he talks about, oh, here it is, sub for white people only. He says that they also set up a new racist subreddit, Sub for White People Only, which was meant to only be for white Redditors. So you can see how they first changed the definition of racism, because making a sub only for black people would be racist, by definition. They say, eventually non-black allies were allowed to apply for verification. A white user posted a picture of himself apologizing for institutional racism and bland chicken. An Asian American guy posted a picture of his arm next to a sign praising Killmonger, the villain from Black Panther. They created the Sub for White People Only and said, don't get mad when we vote back in segregation. The backlash to the Black People Twitter policy even inspired InfoWars article from Paul Joseph Watson, citing the non-black Reddit users who had asked to be verified to use the subreddit. Watson wrote that they were humiliating themselves. Remember, folks, your white privilege entitles you to be blocked from entire internet forums because segregation is progressive now. One of the biggest problems with the left, for me, like why I repeatedly call them out, is that this kind of behavior violates social norms, but I believe they're protected under Section 230, and I don't like it. But let's go back to this story real quick. When a Microsoft engineer was complaining about discrimination against whites and Asians, of course, Ars Technica will only frame the white men section. But it's really strange. This is a whistleblower. The Microsoft employee speaking up and saying the company discriminates based on race. This is a violation of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. This is whistleblowing, a crime. What does the left-wing media do? They accuse, they attack, they support violations of civil rights law. It is it's the craziest thing. And they also try and frame it. Framing is a really, really important tool that, it's not always intentional, but there's something I want to point out. If you watch my main channel, here's what I try to do. The video always starts with a first-minute summary. The first thing I tell you is the straight news story. Today I did a video about wokeness backfiring on the Democrats. I also want to point out that my channel I try to make it dedicated to more extremely surface-level issues like the Democrats. And so sometimes it's not the most interesting thing, but I want my main channel to be focused on the current, like what's happening. So it's about Joe Biden. The first thing I do is I say, Joe Biden is facing criticism from the left and the right. The left says this, the right says this. That's your news. I don't want to frame it in a certain way. I'm giving you my best assessment of what the stories are. If I was to frame my stories to manipulate, you would start by saying, the woke left has attacked and insulted and belittled and berated and set fires, and now they're coming for Joe Biden because X happened. So you set up the narrative to where this is a villain and then defend Joe Biden. I try avoiding doing that. So after my first minute summary, I start with the main story. So I'll have like an actual source citation. Here's what the news says about X. I typically try to avoid framing techniques like they do here. So Ars Technica does decently in the beginning, but some Microsoft employees are criticizing the company's efforts to increase hiring from underrepresented demographics to make its staff more diverse, according to messages leaked to Quartz. That's not true at all. So here's another problem. This is a lie. This is quite literally fake news. Let me tell you the truth. Some Microsoft employees are criticizing overt violations of civil rights law that openly discriminate against people based on their race, according to messages leaked to Quartz. What they're doing here is something different from framing the narrative. This is just outright lying. Threads started by an as yet unnamed female programmer and posted on the internal Yammer message board in January and April assert that white men and Asian men are being penalized and overlooked because of hiring practices that reward managers for hiring people outside of those groups. Further, the employee questions the value of diversity at all, saying that many women simply aren't cut out for the corporate rat race, so to speak. And that's not because of the patriarchy. It's because men and women aren't identical. She follows up that is established fact, and that the scientific types of thought process and problem solving required for engineering of all kinds are simply less prevalent among women, and that women simply aren't interested in engineering jobs. Established fact. So there's many techniques they use, but outside of me criticizing the media, the point I want to bring up is if an employee says, "Hey, my company is violating the law," don't you think most people would be like, "Wow, it's a big story. We have evidence of the law being violated"? No, the left defends the racist policies. I always want to make sure, so listen. The Reddit thing about verifying yourself, it was a joke based on the theme of the subreddit, and I really don't care about jokes. Now, If they actually went to the point where they banned people from posting unless they were of a certain race, that's crossing the line. It's no longer a joke. You're actually implementing it. If someone says they're joking but makes a threat, I'm going to tell you you're not joking. Yeah, you can't do that. But the biggest, issue that I want to highlight for this story is that every single time someone says, hey, don't discriminate based on race, it's illegal or it's wrong, they're called conservative, they're called right-wing. I'm certainly not. But they definitely want to frame it that way. The left has become racially identitarian. They support violations of the law. They defend it. And it's really, really weird. It's really weird to see this. The Raider comments are actually pretty bland, but go back and forth. What they do is they always want to frame the story to say, this group is a victim. Now, here's the story. This person said X. Oh, how dare they say that about a victim? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there's only 10 people or 1,000 people or 200 people. We should judge them based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. So these are just a couple stories I thought were silly, but you get the point. I'll wrap it up there. I got one more video coming up in a few minutes. I will see you shortly.